Hi everyone, this is Matt from Your Lesson speaking, and in this video I'm going to comment on the image stabilization system of the Panasonic GX80 or GX85 for North America and the Olympus Pen F. Why this comparison? Well, because both cameras feature 5-axis sensor stabilization. For Panasonic it is a first, while Olympus has been using this technology for years now. The Pen F has the most recent sensor shift hardware, and it is the same found on the OMD EM5 Mark II. I'm going to show you the performance for both still images and video to find out if the new GX80 is at the same level of Olympus cameras, if not better. On paper, the Panasonic camera has an advantage. With select Panasonic lenses, it uses the sensor and the optical stabilization at the same time with a system called Dual IS. Currently, there are more than 10 Lumix lenses compatible with Dual IS, and more will come. The Pen F also has a similar system called Sync IS, but only one lens is compatible, the 300mm f4 Pro. All the other Olympus Micro Four Thirds lenses lack optical stabilization. I had the chance to test that lens on the EM1 in January, and the result was very impressive. However, because it is only related to one specific lens and I didn't have a 300mm Pro sample with me for this comparison, I'll have to skip the Olympus Sync IS. It is also unlikely you will use such a large and heavy lens on the Pen F anyway. The first test is with wide-angle lenses. I used the Micro Zuiko 9-18mm and the Lumix 12-32mm. The latter is compatible with Dual IS on the GX80. With both cameras shooting handheld at 12mm, I managed to get a sharp shot down to 2 seconds of exposure. I got the same result with the 12-32mm on the GX80. This tells us that the Dual IS system on the GX80 doesn't give us a concrete advantage. Actually, it took fewer attempts with the Pen F to get that 2-second exposure sharp. The second test is with telephoto lenses. I used the Micro Zuiko 75mm 1.8 and the Lumix 35-100mm f2.8. The Lumix lens is compatible with Dual IS once again. When using the Olympus 75mm, I got the same result with both cameras, a 1/4 of a second shot handheld. However, when using the Lumix lens at 100mm, I was able to bring back a sharp shot at 0.8 seconds with the GX80. At 1 second, I got an almost perfect image. It took different attempts of course, but it's an impressive result that I wasn't able to get with the Pen F. So Dual IS does bring an advantage with telephoto lenses. That actually confirms the results I got with the Olympus 300mm and also the Panasonic 100-400mm on the GX8 that also has the Dual IS system, though it's not as advanced. Now let's move to video. Here I'm going to show a different example with static shots, panning, and myself moving with the camera. I'm going to compare the performance of the sensor stabilization alone, then analyze what advantages the Dual IS system can bring. Both cameras include software stabilization. The frame is slightly cropped and the shakes are also corrected digitally. Let's have a look at what difference it makes. We start with a static shot taken at 100mm. Here we can notice that both the Pen F and the GX80 give similar results. The GX80 footage is a little more stable thanks to the Dual IS. In the second shot I have the same focal length, but I am focusing much closer to my subject, so the little movements I make while holding the camera are magnified. The advantage of Dual IS is more evident. If I activate the software stabilization, I get near perfect footage with the GX80. So once again, Dual IS gives us an advantage with telephoto lenses, and the software stabilization helps to perfect that performance. In the second test, I am panning left to right. We can notice that on the GX80 we get these unpleasant jerks at the beginning, but then the performance improves after a few seconds. The same happens with electronic stabilization activated. On the Pen F, the footage is smoother from the beginning of my movement. However, on both cameras we can notice some jittering even when using the appropriate shutter speed, 1/50 of a second in this case because I recorded at 25 frames per second. Note that in video mode with both cameras you can't select vertical stabilization unlike with still shooting. Now it's time to move with the camera, and here's where we're going to see different examples. The first shows me walking on a dirt path following header. I am using sensor stabilization only with the Olympus 9-18mm on both cameras. The Pen F seems to have a little more distortion than the GX80, but both cameras do a good job with the stabilization. With both cameras, adding electronic stabilization into the mix doesn't make a huge difference. Actually, it can amplify the distortion effects in some situations. When using dual IS on the GX80 with a 12-32mm at 25mm, we can notice that the Pen F does a better job with sensor stabilization only. The GX80 footage is bumpier, especially for the vertical movement. The big surprise comes with the 35-100mm set at 35mm. That gives us a 70mm equivalent focal length, which is too much to follow a person handheld. Any serious filmmakers will think I'm crazy right now, but it was just a curiosity really. As you can see, the Pen F really makes a big difference here. In the third scene, I'm walking towards header and pan to the right to adjust my composition. This example lets us look more deeply into the distortion or jello effect that I mentioned earlier. Look what happens with the Pen F while I'm adjusting my composition. This is part of the footage I would not use because I wasn't ready, so I was moving the camera excessively, but it's useful to show you how bad distortion can be. This is a limit I find with all 5-axis stabilization sensors. Here the Pen F stabilizes better and is less jerky, but the jello and distortion effect is definitely more visible. The GX80 is less precise but has less distortion. Dual IS improves the performance just a little. In our final example, I'm going to show where the 5-axis stabilization can be really useful in addition to the static shots seen at the beginning. I'm following header again, but this time we also go up and down some tall stairs. Pay attention to how the image stabilization really makes a difference when I'm going down and up those stairs where the camera has more violent shakes to correct. The bottom line is, 5-axis stabilization gives you better results for more complex movements. The flaws I showed you before are still there, but because we're moving in all sorts of different directions, we notice them less because the action is more interesting. In this last example, both cameras do a similar job even with dual IS on the GX80. Keep in mind that I haven't tested every Panasonic dual IS lens, so the performance may vary. One last point I want to talk about is something that I call the sudden sideways shift. I already mentioned it in the OMD EM5 Mark II review, but we can notice it here as well. Basically, the person or an element in your scene suddenly shifts position inside your frame. As you can see, it happens in various situations. It looks like the image stabilization tries to overcompensate for shakes and movements, causing this weird effect that in some cases almost looks like the recording missed a few frames. This is actually the most difficult flaw to prevent because you never know for sure when it's going to happen. The best thing is to record several takes of your shot. The goal is to improve your movement, Be as delicate and precise as possible and avoid brusque movements that are likely to cause this problem more easily. As usual, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. Please like the video, subscribe, and make sure to follow us. There are lots of new videos about mirrorless cameras coming soon.